How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Ches, Daf 38 of Masechta Zevachim. Friends, on today's Daf, we continue working through the Mishnah that we had learned yesterday, the first Mishnah in the fourth pair of Masechta Zevachim. Yesterday we had discussed how do we know that there's a minimum of one matan domim for korbanis that are offered on the Mizbeach Achitzon. Today we are going to discuss the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel when it comes to korban chatas. When it comes to a korban chatas, Beis Shammai says that you have to do at least two, right? That when it comes to a korban chatas, the kohen will take his finger and he'll stick it into a vessel full of blood, and he will take his finger and he will apply the blood to each of the four corners of the mizbeach. When it comes to a korban chatas, Beis Shammai says that two of those applications are the minimum, not just one, whereas Beis Hillel says that by a korban chatas as well, one is the minimum. On today's daf, we are going to really discuss how we learn out, right, Beis Shammai, how we learn out Beis Hillel, and along the way, we will discuss Yeshem Mikra, Yeshem Masoret. This is actually, we're going to see machloksin that we have seen in other places as well. So this is what we have ahead of us in store for us today on Daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Zevachim. All right, friends, we are going to begin on Daf Lamed Zayin Amid Beis at the two dots, about 10 or 15 lines or so from the bottom. So, when it comes to korban chatas, so Beis Shammai says that there's a minimum of two applications of blood by korban chatas. Beis Hillel says one. Now, Rav Huna says, Rav Huna, my time with Beis Shammai, how come Beis Shammai says that there's a minimum of two out of the four applications? Karnis, arikan sheish, arba, lemitzvah v'sham la'akev v'sil, karnas, arikan arba, shalosh mitzvah achas le'akev. Cheved, this, we saw this on Daf Dalid of Masechta Sanhedrin. I'm just confirming that, but why do I not? Sanhedrin, Daf Dalid. There you go. Starting on Daf Dalid of Masechta Sanhedrin. This is the machlokes about Yesh Eim L'Mikra, Yesh Eim L'Masoret. We've seen this in other places as well. I've seen it in Masechta Sukkah. There's the question of Yesh Eim L'Mikra, which means that when determining how to learn a pasuk, let's say, is it plural, is it singular, we go based on how you read it. So therefore, if the pasuk says karnos is plural, so that means minimum of two. However, it's written without a vav, karnas, which if we go based Yeshem the Masoret, based on the tradition that we have of how the word is to be written, it's to be written singular, right? And without nikudos, whatever, you can read it as karnas, singular. So the question is it karnos, plural, 2 plus 2 plus 2? Are we working with 6 over here? Or Beis Hillel says two of the psukim say karnas, whereas one of them says karnos. Interestingly, in our chumashim, I believe all three say karnas. But anyways, says Beis Hillel, according to Rav Huna, that two psukim say karnas, which is singular, so that's 1 plus 1 is 2. But one of them says, the third pasuk says karnos, which is plural, so 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 4. So now, again, Rav Huna says, Rav Huna, my time with the Beis Shammai, how come Beis Shammai says that 2 out of the 4 are ma'akev? Karnos, because in all three instances, the word is read karnos, which is plural. So minimum of plural is 2. 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6. So arekan sheish, so you have 6. Okay. Basically, of those 6, you have the initial 4 applications of blood by korban chatas on each of the 4 corners. But then we have an additional 2 to kind of reiterate that, and 2 of them are ma'akev. Keilu, we have 6 to say that, okay, the 4 are lemitzvah, right? There's, of course, the 4 applications of blood, but the extra 2 are to say that 2 of them, though, that while 4 of them are kind of what you should do, but 2 of them are what you must do. It's kind of reiterating that 2 of them 2 of the 4 are going to be ma'akev. So 4 are the mitzvah, but then there's 2 of them that you really have to do. So Arekan Sheish Arba Lemitzvah, 4 are lichatchila, what you really need to do, but Shtayim La'akev, that at a very minimum, you have to do 2. There's a leftover 2 to say that you have to at least do 2. Beis Hillel, karnos, whereas Beis Hillel says, look, the pasuk, 2 of the words are singular, karnas, and the third one is karnos. So 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 4. Harikan arba, shalosh lemitzvah, 3 of the 4 are meaning, right, ve'achas le'akev, right, meaning, ideally you should do all 4, but at least 1 of the 4 is what is going to be ma'akev, and the additional 3, hopefully, are lichatchila. Right? Lichatchila, you should do not just the 1 that you have to do, but also the additional 3, and you should do all 4, but you have to do at least 1. But now the Gemara says, but one second. Tilu, when it came to Beis Shammai, they learned out 2 are ma'akev because in addition to the 4 that are a minimum, there was an additional 2, right? Karnos is 6. So in addition to the 4 that ideally you should do, there's an extra 2 to kind of reiterate that 2 of the 4 you have to do. Those are ma'akev. So I would think that according to Beis Hillel, if 1 of them is ma'akev, then there should have been 5, right? Kilu 4 are lichatchila, but then there's an extra 1 to reiterate that 1 of them is ma'akev, but there's only 4. So maybe I'll say that all 4, right? There's no reiteration. Maybe I'll argue that according to Beis Hillel, based on the fact that it says karnos, that there's 4 that we're working with, maybe all 4 are lichatchila. Lichatchila, you should do all 4. If you don't do any of them, okay, it works. Maybe so maybe I'll say that actually all 4 are lichatchila, but if you didn't do any, that could be okay. Also, kapara b'chli lo ashkan. Yeah, but you can't have a person getting kapara for doing a sin and bringing a korban chatas and not doing any matan damim. That can't be. Alternatively, this is pshat with Beis Hillel. Ahani Mikra ve'ahani Masoret. This is a very interesting pshat, and we're going to work through this pshat now for the next few minutes in different contexts. But basically, alternatively, you could say, you know how Beis Hillel gets to the 5, right? As we said earlier, that according to Beis Shammai, there are 6 that they're working with. 4 are lichatchila. The extra 2 are to reiterate that 2 are ma'akev. And we said, well, then ideally, I would want to see that according to Beis Hillel, there should be 5 that we're working with. 4 are lichatchila, and we're reiterating that 1 additional one. Well, meaning there's 5 to say that 4 are lichatchila, but the additional 1 represents that 1 of them, though, is ma'akev. You have to do at least 1. So we could say that actually, according to Beis Hillel, you do get to 5. How do you get to 5? Well, because Beis Hillel is actually working with both Yeshem Mikra as well as Yeshem Masoret. So Yeshem Mikra said karnos, which is 6. Yeshem Masoret was karnos, which is 4. And Beis Hillel is saying that we basically meet in the middle, right? That you work together with both the Yeshem Mikra and the Yeshem Masoret, and you meet them in the middle. So in our case, and we're going to work through different scenarios of this, but in our case, we're working with Yeshem Mikra, which is 6, Yeshem Masoret, which is 4, and we'll meet in the middle at 5, to which we'll say, so 5 represents that ideally you should do matan damim on all 4, but you have the leftover 1 as well, right? 5 minus 4 is 1. The 1 is left over to reiterate that at least 1, however, you must do. Okay, again, alternatively, Hainu time of the Beis Hillel. This is how to explain Beis Hillel, who says that 1 matan damim is me'akev. Ahani Mikra v'ahani Masoret. We work together with both the Yeshem Mikra, which is 6, and Yeshem Masoret, which is 4. Ahani Mikra l'tafur yechada. The Yeshem Mikra, the 6, comes to add 1. V'ahani Masoret l'vatzur yechada. The Yeshem Masoret comes to remove 1. Right, so like the Yeshem Mikra adds 1 to the 4, and Yeshem Masoret removes 1 from the 6, i.e., they meet in the middle. So you have 6, you have 4, they meet in the middle at 5. 4 are lemitzvah, 1 is le'akev. Okay, but now we ask in all sorts of other scenarios of Yeshem Mikra and Yeshem Masoret. For example, by tefillin. How do we know that there are 4 compartments in that there are 4 parshas in the tefillin? Well, it says, "Ve'elu totafos bein enech." What was this? Wait, the alfinimida arba batim. Okay, that there are 4 compartments to the tefillin shel rosh. That's because it says it says in the Torah, litotafos 4 times. In 2 of them it says tatfas, which is singular, but in 1 of them it says the totafos, right? Meaning if you say yesh em limasoris, so then it's tatfas, tatfas, totfo, tatfas, tatfas, totafos. So therefore 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 4. Right, so again, so elamiata, not again, but elamiata, litatfas, litotafos, arikan arba. So ahani kra, bahani masoras, chamisha bate, boy lemebod. So if Beis Hillel is going to say that we work together with Yeshem the Mikra and Yeshem the Masoret, well then we'd say that litotafos, which is Yeshem the Mikra. So then we'd have 6 compartments in the tefillin, and the litotafos, 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 4. So we meet in the middle. Are we saying that there should be 5 compartments in the tefillin shorosh? So Savila Rabbi Akiva, well, when it comes to tefillin, Beis Hillel holds like Rabbi Akiva, to Amar, who says, Tat bekasvei shtaim, pas be'afrike shtaim, that in the faraway place of kasvei as well, right? So in kasvei tat is 2, and in afrike pas is 2. So 2 plus 2 is 4. So Beis Hillel agrees with Rabbi Akiva, holds like Rabbi Akiva, that the reason why there are 4 compartments in the tefillin shorosh is not because of Yeshem Limasoris, but rather because Totafos is composed of 2 words, Tat and Fas. Tat is 2 in Kasve, and Pas is 2 in Afrike. That's how you know 4, but not because of Yeshem Limikra, Yeshem Limasoris. El miata basukos. Okay, but then what about by sukkahs, right? We've seen this in Masechta Sukkah. It's actually a little bit different, I think, in Masechta Sukkah. This was machlokas, I think, between the Chacham and Reb Shimon, I think, in Masechta Sukkah. That Reb Shimon says that you have to have 4 walls in your sukkah as a minimum. The Chacham say 3 walls. I think that was the machlokas in Masechta Sukkah. Over there, we learned it out, it doesn't matter how we learn it out in Masechta Sukkah, but the point is that we saw this discussion of yesh em lemikra, which would be, right, it says basukos 3 times, basukos, 2, right, plural each time, so that's 2, and 2 and 2 is 6, or it's written in 2 of the instances singular, so basukos, 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 4. So now, based on this concept of meeting in the middle, that we're going to incorporate both Yeshem Lemikra of 6 and Yeshem Lemasaris of 4, who will meet in the middle, does that mean that there would be 5 walls of the sukkah? Chav, did anybody make a sukkah with 5 walls? So the me'ata basukos. So Yeshem Lemikra would be 6, Yeshem Lemasaris would be 4, Ahani Mikra v'Ahani Masaris, Chamisha dafnis abai lemebud. So what? If we meet in the middle at 5, are you telling me that according to Beis Hillel there should be 5 walls in the sukkah? Well, actually, Hasam, Chadkra Kule Legufa, this actually was a concept that we did, I believe, learn in Masechta Sukkah, that, well, one of them is needed to teach us Pashit that you have to make a sukkah, right? It's about Basukkah stage, Rishivas, whatever. One of them we can't use because we need it to teach itself, not to make any joshers, but simply that you need to make a sukkah. So we're down to 4 now. And one of them is talking about the schach, but here we're talking about the walls, so that's irrelevant as well. So now we're down to 3. Right, so we started at 5. We said, well, we got to throw out 1 because 1 is needed to simply that you need to make a sukkah. The other one is teaching about the schach, so we're down to 4. We're down to 3, and now and as we learned in Masechta Sukkah, that the 3rd wall only needs to be a minimum of a tefach wide. So there you have it. So yes, you can say that we're meeting in the middle. Sukkos, or sukkos, right? That 6 and 4, we meet in the middle at 5. Then you have to remove 1 for itself. You remove another one because that's the schach. You're left with 3. And yes, that's the halacha. You need 3 walls for a sukkah. El miato v'tama shvu'ayim shiv'im ahani krav ahani masaras abayim v'train by lemichtav. When the pasuk says by a yoledes, by a woman who gives birth to a girl. So when a woman gives birth to a girl, so for 2 weeks, she is Tmeya, right? After giving birth to a girl, right? After giving birth to a boy, she's Tmeya for 1 week. After giving birth to a girl, she is Tmeya for 2 weeks. Now the suggestion is, wait, how do we know that word is Shvu'ayim, which means 2 weeks. Maybe it's shiv'im, i.e. 70 days. So if you say yeshim Mikra, it's shvu'ayim, which is 2 weeks. But if you say yeshim Masoret, you could say shiv'im, which is 70. So is it 2 weeks, which is 14 days, or is it 70 days? Well, let's meet in the middle. What's the difference between 14 and 70? 56. What's 56 divided by 2? 28. So why don't we say, let's meet in the middle between 14 and 70, which is 28 plus 14, which is 42. Let's say that she's Tameh for 42 days. So says the Gemara, so again, so Elamiyata v'tama shvu'ayim, shivim, let's say shivim. So ahanikra v'ahani masoret, let's say Mikra is shvu'ayim, which is 2 weeks. Masoret is shivim, which is 70 days. Let's meet in the middle. Arbaim v'train, ba'ya l'meisav, that she's Tameh for 42 days. So shiny awesome, dichsiv kinidasa. To which we say, no, that is not, we're not going to meet in the middle over there. Why? Because it says, v'tama shvu'ayim kinidasa. It says that after giving birth to a girl, she is Tameh for 2 days. Just like when she's a nida, right? That we're comparing the tumas yoledes to tumas nida. What's tumas nida? 1 week. So therefore we're comparing, so if we're going to say, is it shvu'ayim, which is 2 weeks, or is it shiv'im, which is 70 days? We're going to say, well, it says shvu'ayim kinidasa. Just like a nida, we're talking about in increments of a week. So shvu'ayim is 2 weeks, rather than shiv'im, which is 70 days, right? So therefore, is it shvu'ayim or is it shiv'im? It's shvu'ayim, just like a nida is mida oraisa, 1 week. So also by a yoledes, we're talking about shvu'ayim. V'tana ma'asila me'ocha. And there is a Tana, we had just learned Rav Huna, right? That Rav Huna had said, how do we know the machlokes in Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? We had learned enough from Yeshel Mikra, Yeshel Masoret. There's a Tana who learns out the Shita of Beis Hillel, who says that there's a minimum of 1 matan damim by korban chatas from the following. V'tana ma'asila me'ocha, a Tana learns Beis Hillel's opinion from here. V'chiper. This is by korban chatases. You have, of course, as we know from Masechta Horius, the Sa'ir Nasi, that when the king sins, he doesn't just bring a regular korban chatas, he brings a Sa'ir Nasi. So it says by the Sa'ir Nasi, v'chiper, and also a regular person's korban chatas is either a kispa or a seira, and it says by kispa v'chiper, and it says by seira v'chiper. Basically, by korban chatas, it says v'chiper 3 times in 3 different psukim. So v'chiper mipnei adin. I need the psukim to say v'chiper 3 times, because otherwise I would have drawn a different conclusion with my noggin. Sheyacho v'halo dinu, because I could have used my noggin and concluded the following: Nemru damim lemata, v'nemru damim lemaila. Well, there's, of course, we know matan damim below the chut hasikra, the red line that surrounds the mizbeach, and korbanos that would be below the chut hasikra is, I think, basically all korbanos other than korban chatas and olas ha'of. So there are korbanos that their blood is below the chut hasikra, and there are korbanos like a korban chatas whose blood is above the chut hasikra. And just like when it comes to the korbanos, at least of the mizbeach achitzon, we said that their blood is below the chut hasikra. For example, korban shlamim, korban asham, korban ola. So we said one korban toda, 1 application of blood is enough. Now this, of course, we had learned at the end of the daf yesterday that there was one approach that learns out those from korban chatas, that because korban chatas is 1, Beis Hillel says 1, so we say that's the case by all korbanos, if you remember from the very end of yesterday's daf. So, but at this point on today's daf, we're trying to learn out how we know Beis Hillel says that you need a minimum of 1. So this shita, this argument, this approach, obviously, what we're working through in the Gemara right now, obviously, is not like that shita, which learns out these other korbanos from korban chatas, because we're trying to figure out korban chatas. However, according to what I referred to yesterday as our Tana, which was the first brisa, right, the Tana of our brisa, which was the first brisa in the Gemara yesterday, who learns it out from Vidam Zvachecha Yishafech. Well then, okay, so because we know that all these other korbanos from Vidam Zvachecha Yishafech, which is singular, that one application of blood is sufficient for these other korbanos. So just like there's the other korbanos, which are whose blood is thrown below the chutas sikra, and you have a korban chatas whose blood is thrown above the chutas sikra. So just like these other korbanos have a minimum of one application of blood, so also korban chatas similarly as a minimum of one application of blood. Right, so again, these korbanos whose blood is thrown below the chutas sikra, and there are korbanos whose blood is thrown above the chutas sikra. So just like, of course, assume that you learn out from V'dam Zvachecha Yishafech. So just like those korbanos, one application of blood is sufficient. So also the korban chatas, whose blood is above the chutas sikra, one application of blood is sufficient. But 1 second, I'll make the following argument. 1 second. But there's also blood applied to a parlam davar shel tzibur, for example, right? Korbanos that their blood is offered is thrown inside the heichal, and in those cases, actually all four must be done. Just like as we learned yesterday in the Mishnah, that the korbanos whose blood is thrown inside the eichel, all four must be applied. So I'll argue that similarly, a korban chatos on the mizbeach hachitzon also, you must do all four. So near the midome. So I'll say, okay, fine. So now we're in a quandary. Who do we compare it to? Do we compare the chatas achitzon to the other korbanos achitzon, the chata, right, and say that, well, just like those, all you have to do is one. So also korban chatas, all you have to do is one. Or do we say, well, let's compare korban chatas to korban chatas, right? There's a chatas achitzon and a chatas apnimi. So which one do we compare it to? Done in chutz mi chutz, vein done in chutz mi bifnim. So one option is to say, look, all those korbanos that they're below the chutas sikra on the mizbeach hachitzon, as well as the korban chatas on the mizbeach hachitzon, they're all outside of the heichal, they're all in the azar. So let's learn those out from each other and say that there's a minimum of one. Or maybe, though I'll suggest, 1 second, maybe I should learn out the chatas achitzon from the chatas apnimi. Right? After all, they're both chatases. And just like the chatas apnimi, you got to do all four corners. So maybe I'll say that the chatas achitzon also you have to do all four. So Talmud Lomar, that's why we need to rely on v'chiper, because otherwise I would get stuck. I wouldn't know if all four are makev or only one is makev. Therefore we have v'chiper, afapish l'nosen ele shalosh. That even if all you did was 3 matan damim, it's kosher. And the other additional chiper knocks it down to even if you only did 2. And finally, the third v'chiper knocks it down to even 1. That even if the third chiper, right, so it starts with 4 corners, 1 chiper knocks it down to 3, the next one knocks it down to 2, and the third chiper knocks it down to 1. That even if you only applied blood to 1 corner of the mizbeach by korban chatas, it is sufficient. 1 second. You can't just say that, oh yeah, v'chiper is teaching us this drasha. We need v'chiper to mamish teach us that there is a kapara, kilu. Right, v'chiper is saying, and they are atoned, right? The king is atoned, or whoever has to bring a korban chatas is atoned. The chiper isn't just there for a drush, it's there to say that they actually attain atonement. So Rave says Rave, Bar Ada Mari, my teacher Bar Ada Azrali explained to me, Amr that the pasuk says, V'chiper v'nislach. That the pasuk says, in all 3 cases, the pasuk doesn't just say v'chiper, it also says v'nislach, right? One pasuk says, V'chiper alav akoy mechataso, v'nislach lo. Or alternatively, v'chiper alav hakoyin v'nislach lo. Or v'chiper alav hakoyin ha'chatos ha'shechata v'nislach lo. In all three cases, it doesn't just say v'chiper, but it also says v'nislach, zoi kapara, zoi slicha. They are the same. So I think the point is that you could learn out the atonement from v'nislach lo, and we can learn out from chiper to knock it down from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. But again, fact Gemara, ema, but maybe I'll make the alternative suggestion that when it says v'chiper af al pi shalonosan ela shalosh lemala v'achas lemato, maybe the first v'chiper is saying, look, so initially we have figured there's 4 corners in this mizbeach, and you have to apply the blood of the chatas on all 4 corners in this mizbeach. But then it says v'chiper. Maybe it's not just saying that even though you only did 3 and you totally left out the 4th one and just didn't do it at all. Maybe you have to do the 4th one, just maybe not above the chut hasikra, right? Maybe you did 3 of them on the corners of them, right, above the chut hasikra. The 4th one you did, but it was below the chut hasikra. And it says, you know what, and you even get atonement if 2 were above the chut hasikra and 2 were below the chut hasikra. Alternatively, even though you didn't do any of them above the chut hasikra, all 4 of them were below the chut hasikra, still you get kapara. So meaning, we're suggesting that it's not that the one, right, that you're not doing them at all, right? It's not that, you know, v'chiper, even though you did 3 and you didn't do the 4th one at all, even though you did 2 and you didn't do the other 2 at all, even though you did 1, you didn't do the other 3 at all. No, it's not saying that you have to do all 4. But what it's saying is that maybe even though you didn't do all 4 above the chut hasikra, but even if you did all 4 of them but below the chut hasikra, it would still be kosher, but you still have to do all 4. So Amar Rav Ada bar Yitzchak im gein bitalta Torah Kronus. It says Rav Ada bar Yitzchak, well, if you're saying that you don't need to do any of them above the chut hasikra, you can just do all 4 of them below the chut hasikra, well then, why is the pasuk talking about the kronos, the corners of the mizbeach, right? And the top of the mizbeach, there were those 4 cubes on each of the corners. Why is the pasuk even talking about that? If technically you could just do it below the chut hasikra. Says the Gemara, well, v'rachmana amar livatlin. I mean, that's not really our problem. What are you getting worked up about? The Torah says, yeah, you should do it on the corners of the mizbeach, but the Torah also says v'chiper to say that. But you know what? Even if you did it below the chut hasikra, it still works. So Kilu, why are you getting worked up? Well then you mevatel the kronos. Well, I don't know if the Torah is saying to mevatel the kronos. So technically, you're yotzi even if you mevatel the kronos. On my rove, edu dovashe tzarich shalosh kiper have omer elu kronos. Yeah, but it says Rava here's the thing. According to this suggestion, though, there's something. I don't know if you caught it, but there was something that wasn't quite adding up here. In the recent suggestion, it was, well, okay, ideally, of course, you have to do the applications of blood for the korban chatas on the 4 corners of the mizbeach. So if you say, like we initially said, so there are 3 v'chipers, knocking it down from 4 to 3, from 4, right? The chiper knocks it down to 3, then to 2, then to 1. Okay, givaldig. The thing is that the suggestion that we just made that all 4 are below the chut hasikra, you really need 4 v'chipers, right? Because you're not just knocking it down to 1, you're knocking it down to 0, right? Ideally, you need to have all 4 kronos. Ideally, you have to apply the blood to all 4 corners of the mizbeach at the top. Then we're knocking it down. So if you look at what the suggestion was like, well, yeah, but what if you just did, maybe it's kosher, even if you did 3 above and 1 below, 2 above and 2 below, and then we just jump from 2 to 0 above and 4 below. Really, so we went from 4 to 3, then to 2, then to 0. You would really need 4 v'chipers to go to 3, then to 2, then to 1, then to 0. So it says Rava, look, there are only 3 kipers available. Really, it's teaching that if you just did 1 on the right above, so you start from 4 above, right, and then you go to 3, then to 2, then to 1, that even if you only did 1, it is sufficient. But Ema, okay, but then the Gemara just kind of like tweaks its initial suggestion. It says maybe And then the Shita Mekubetzes adds some stuff here, which I think is good to add, so I'm going to add it. Ella, I'll tell you when I'm back in the Gemara. I'm reading a note on the side of my Gemara in the Agos V'Tzionim. Ella shalosh l'mayla v'achas l'mata. Maybe it's sufficient even if you only did 3 above and 1 below. Or 2 above and 2 below. And I'm back in the Gemara now. So meaning instead of the earlier suggestion was v'chipar, even though 3 above and 1 below, 2 above and 2 below, and then it just jumped to 0. Maybe don't jump all the way to 0. Maybe what it's saying is the 3 v'chipars are saying even though you only did 3 above and 1 below, 2 above and 2 below, or 1 above and 3 below. Maybe that's what it's saying. So maybe you do have to do all 4 applications of the blood by korban chatas. And what v'chipar is just saying that even if 3 of those are below the chutas sikra and only 1 of them is above the chutas sikra, that's sufficient. Maybe that's what it means. Yeah, but the thing is, we don't have any precedent anywhere else where you would have 1 above and 3 below, that there's like this distinction of above and below. Rather, it's that, the others, you're just simply not doing it all. Even though you only did 1, and that was it, it's sufficient. Below, we don't have any instances, any precedents for for distinctions between above and below. It says by Yom Kippur, v'hiza b'menu achas l'mayla v'shavas l'mata. Right, achas v'achas, achas v'shtayim, achas v'shalosh, etc. Like we said recently on Yom Kippur. So it says that 1 was above, one of the, Zrikas Adam's, the sprinkling of the blood was above, and 7 were below. Hahu kimatzlif. The Gemara says no, it wasn't actually above and below. It was kimatzlif. My kimatzlif machir Rav Yehuda ki minagdono. No, it's like It's like when you give makis, right? If you're whipping somebody, so you're not going to whip in the same place. Again, you do 1 and then 1 below that, 1 below that, 1 below that. So it's not like there was like an imaginary 50% halfway mark, and 1 was above and 7 were below the halfway mark. No, it wasn't like that. It's that there was 1, they were kind of 1 and then 1 below that, 1 below that, 1 below that, but not like 1, in the top half and 7 in the lower half. No, it was just 1 above, and then the others were just 1 after the other below that. He's al Tyrush Mizbeach Sheva Paimim. But it also says in Yoma that he sprinkled on the Tyrush Mizbeach Sheva Paimim. My love, apalgod the Mizbeach kedam rinja tier Tyra vavi palgod Yoma. That when it says that there were 7 sprinklings al Tyrush Mizbeach, we want to argue that Tyro means halfway, the halfway mark of the Mizbeach, and we're saying my love, apalgod the Mizbeach kedam rinja, like people say tiara. That and the tiara, which is the tiara, I guess is like the middle of the day, and it'll be halfway through the day. Meaning, we want to say that al tiara Rosh Mizbeach means just like tira ve'havi pagad yom means halfway through the day. So that would mean halfway through the mizbeach, halfway up the mizbeach. I.e., he would sprinkle the blood towards the halfway mark of the mizbeach. Some would be above, and some would be below. So Rav Bar Shila. Lo agiluya. No, it means on the top. It was sprinkled on the top of the mizbeach. T'chsiv uchetzem hashmayim latohar, and it says that by the zaken that they saw ke'etzem hashmayim latohar, like the essence of the heavens that was cleared away. And here also by the mizbeach, it was cleared away at the top from any ashes or whatever that was there, so that he could sprinkle the blood there. So it's not talking about any distinction between above and below. Vayika shirayin. What about the fact that when you have a korban chatas, so you have the applications of the blood above the chutas sikra, but then the rest of the blood, the shirayin, is going to be spilled on the yesod mizbeach, which is below the chutas sikra. Shirayin lo ma'akve. Yeah, but the shirayin, even if you didn't spill them on the yesod mizbeach, the korban would still be kosher, right? The application of the blood at the corners at the top, though, is ma'akev, whereas the pouring of the shiraim on the yesod is not. Ve'ika shiraim hapnimim te'ika demanda omar me'akve Okay, but what about when it comes to a chatas hapnimi, right? So if you have, let's say, the par kohen Mashiach, and so he applies the blood on the mizbeach hapnimi, and then the shirayim, there's an opinion, right? He then takes out to the mizbeach hachitzon and spills them out on the mizbeach hachitzon on the yesod. And there's an opinion that is ma'akiv. You have to do that. Okay, so in that case, you do have a distinction between above and below. You have the blood that's being applied at the top of the mizbeach hapnimi, then being brought out to the mizbeach hachitzon and poured on the yesod at the bottom of the mizbeach hachitzon. So there is a distinction between above and below. B'chad mokum coming in, yeah, but we're talking about above and below in one location. Over there, you have above and below spread out across two separate locations, one at the top of the Mizbeach Apnimi, and then being brought out and spilled at the Yisod of the Mizbeach Hachitzon. We are not talking about such a scenario. Tanya, we learned in a Rebbe ben Yaakov, Beshamai omrim shtei matanos shebechatos. Says Rebbe ben Yaakov that Beshamai say that the two matanos by the korban chatos, which of course are me'akev, right? Beishamai says that two of the matanos by korban chatos you must do. And the one minimum matan damim by all of the other korbanos, matiros, so you have to do both of them. You have to do both of them. Well, by korban chatos you have to do both of them, and by all the other korbanos you'd have to do the minimum of one in order to then allow the korban to be, for the meat to be able to be eaten, and for the emurim to be able to be burnt in the mizbeach, umifaglos, as well as you have to have. So according to if you have a machshav of chutz lizmano by the matan dam, by that singular matan dam by all the other korbanos, or you'd have to have machshavas pigul by both of the applications of blood, according to Beis Shammai by a korban chat. So it's interesting, this is both a chumrah and a kula, right? It's a chumrah when according to Beis Shammai, the fact that Beis Shammai requires by a korban chatas a minimum of 2 applications of blood, it's both a chumrah and a kula. How is it a chumrah? Well, it's a chumrah in that, well, when it comes to being matir, so the meat is not able to be eaten and the emurim are not able to be burnt until at a minimum of 2 applications of blood have been applied. If, let's say, one application of blood was applied and then all the blood spilled on the floor and you can't do a second application, well then you can't eat the meat. You can't burn the emurim. The korban is possible. So that's a chumrah. But at the same time, it's a kula, because in terms of pigul, in order for it to be pigul, you would have to have machshavas chutz zmana by both of the applications of the blood. Otherwise, it would only be half of the matir, and even falcon b'chetzi matir. So again, Tani Rebbe ben Yaakov says Rebbe ben Yaakov, Beishamai say shtei matanos shebechatos, the minimum of 2 matanos by a korban chatos, as well as b'achas shebechol azvachim, as well as the minimum of 1 application of blood by all of the other korbanos. Matiris, so once those applications have been done, the meat of the korban cannot be eaten, the emurim cannot be burnt, umefaglis, and it would be pigul if you have machshavas chutz zmano by those applications of blood, by korban chatos, by both of those 2. Beisil say achas shebechatos ve'achas shebechol zvachim. Beisil say that it's of course always only a minimum of 1 application of blood, whether it's the korban chatos, whether it's all the other korbanos materis. That once that 1 application has been applied, the korban, right? You can eat the meat, you can burn the emurim, umifaglos, and if you had a machshavas chutz zmano during that 1 application, it would be pigul. Rabbi Shaya asks, Im kein desnai gabe kule beishame v'chume besilo. In Masechta Idius, it lists the instances where Beis Shammai was lenient and Beis Hillel was stringent. So let us list this as another example where Beis Shammai is being lenient and Beis Hillel is being stringent. How so? As I said earlier, Beis Shammai is being lenient in that in order for a korban to be pigul, you would have to have machshavas chutz lizmanu, not just by the first application of the blood of the chatas, but by the second one as well. If you had a machshavas chutz lizmanu only by one of the applications of blood by korban chatas, it would not be pigul. Whereas Beis Hillel says, if you have a machshavas chutz lizmanu, even just by the first application of the blood of a korban chatas, it would already be pigul. So we see that Beis Shammai is being lenient, Beis Hillel is being stringent. So answers the Gemara, Amar le Rave. So Rave answers, Ki itchil le'atera itchil tavlu Beis Shammai l'chumer. Yes, however, when that question was asked in the Beis HaMedrash, and they were answering and discussing it in Masechta Idios, it was asked about le'atera, meaning they came to the Beis HaMedrash and they asked, what if you did one of the applications of blood of a korban chatas and then all the blood spilled out on the floor? Can you eat the meat? Can the Kohanim eat the meat? Can the emurim be burnt on the mizbeach? So in that context, Beis Hillel is actually the ones being lenient and saying yes, because the first application of blood has been applied, and Beis Shammai would be stringent, saying, no, I'm sorry, but you would have had to have applied 2 applications of blood in order for the meat to be permitted, for the emurim to be burnt, and therefore they would be stringent and say, sorry, but you can't move forward with this korban. Friends, that was Daf Lamed Ches, Daf 38 of Masechta Zevachim. Daf Lamed Ches primarily dealt with the applications of blood of a korban chatas. We had a look at the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai, of course, says that there's a minimum of 2 applications of blood by a korban chatas. Beis Hillel says that there's a minimum of 1 application of blood. How do we learn those out? Rev Huna said that it's a Yesh Em le Mikra, Yesh Em le Masoret play, that Beis Shammai says Yesh Em le Mikra, Karnos. We're talking about 6. 4 are le mitzvah, 2 are me'akev. Beis Hillel says that there's only it's karnas. It's 4, 3 are ma'akev, 1 is 1 is ma'akev, the other 3 are lemitzvah. We then saw this whole exploration that maybe Beis Hillel actually incorporates both Yeshem Lemikra and Yeshem Lemosoris and kind of meets in the middle, and therefore Yeshem Lemikra being 6, Yeshem Lemosoris is 4, he meets in the middle at 5, i.e. 4 are lemitzvah and 1 is me'akev. We saw another explanation for Beis Hillel, which is that it says in the pasuk by korban chatas v'chiper 3 times, each one degrading it by 1. So meaning, if by korban chatas really you have to apply the blood to the 4 corners, but then v'chiper knocks it down to 3, then to 2, then to 1. So only 1 of the applications of blood by korban chatas is actually me'akev. And then we had a look, and then at the end we discussed that according to Beis Shammai by korban chatas, the minimum of 2 applications of blood. So in terms of pigul, you'd have to have machshavas chutz lizmanu by both of those applications, but also the korban would only be considered mutter, right? The shekev matirav only after both applications have been applied. Whereas Beis Hillel would say that after the first application of blood already, the korban is considered to be mutter, right? You can eat the meat, you can burn the emurim. However, if you had machshavas chutz lizmanu by that 1 application of blood, it would be considered pigul. That was the Daf Lamed Ches of Masechta Zevachim. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.